Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate all the amazing people who are working so hard in the trenches to make Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. And today's show is really, celebrating people who are working in the trenches around the world, and in this case, Ukraine. And I want to bring my friend Laurie Jackson, who's an independent missionary working in Ukraine, who has been on this show pretty consistently for almost 3 years now. It's amazing that it's been that long. But Laurie, I'm so glad that you're with me today. How are you doing?
Hi, thank you for inviting me back. Thank you for having been with us all this time, for asking questions, for wanting to know what's happening here, and for listening to the voices on the ground. It's really important for us, for me. And so we're okay. It's hard. Like you said, it's been 3 years, and we all feel it. Mm-hmm.
So let me tell you, I pray about Ukraine a lot. I worry about Ukraine. I'm hopeful about Ukraine these days. And it's a little bit providential, and I do believe in some divine intervention. I literally wrote about the peace deal that's in the works. It's kind of messy and all these different elements. We don't know everything that's going on behind the scenes. It's complicated. I get all that. But my hope is that we can end this war in a way that preserves Ukrainians' ability to control their own destiny and involves NATO in a way that there's peacekeepers and a stronger NATO after it's all said and done. I did not know when I wrote that you were on the schedule. So I literally post that, and I start to prepare for my show, and there you are, Laurie Jackson. I've been wanting to get you on, but I didn't realize today was the day. So it's so awesome to have you. And I tell you, I do, as I pointed out, I do pray for peace, and I do hope this complicated, very complicated moment comes to fruition in a way that's hopeful for Ukrainians. But I know this too from watching the interviews with Ukrainian men on the front line and others who have been injured and some families of men who have been killed, that it's extremely hard for them to see the war come to an end in a way that would not be completely in their favor. So it's tough. This is a tough moment for Ukraine, isn't it, Laurie?
It is. It's really hard. And Ukraine wants peace more than anyone. Ukraine has suffered greatly from Russian aggression. We have had our children kidnapped. We have had civilians ruthlessly murdered. We continue to have territories under occupation. We here, when we first started talking with you, we had just started. Today actually is the 3-year anniversary of our Ant Hill shelter. So on February 25th, 2022, we started inviting people to come stay in this hotel who needed a place to stay. And tomorrow we have one family moving out because they've been able to find an apartment that they can rent in a nearby city where it's safe. And we have another family moving in because they're in an area right now that's under heavy firing and need a place to stay. And so for sure, Ukrainians want peace, but they also want justice. And it's a hard line to find both of those things together. And so what the end to this war will look like, we don't know.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It's so complex, and as I said, there's so much we don't know about what is happening behind the scenes as it relates to all this. For people who have not heard Laurie and me speak before, I have a cousin in Alabama whose daughter Michelle has adopted 2 boys from Ukraine, and one of them actually came from the Donbass region, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And this was before the current war. Now, most people may not realize, or some people may not realize, that there's been conflict with Russia in that region for some time now. But Michelle introduced me to Laurie, who is originally from United States, from Florida. And she's been working in Ukraine for now, is it 17, 18 years now? I can't remember.
20 at the end of May.
Wow, that's a long time. But she went there doing missionary work. She fell in love with the country, and is still there. And in our past conversations, Laura, you and I have talked about how Mississippians share so much in common with Ukrainians. We love our communities, we love our country, we love our family. You're working with a lot of people who are Christian faith. They just want nothing more than to be able to find the best out of their lives and for their families. And you've seen people who were software developers and entrepreneurs, and so many people who've come into this effort that you're part of, that has been providing volunteer services for families and people on the front line who need your assistance. And you've been doing that. It's amazing. 3 years. Today is the 3-year anniversary. Another interesting kind of coincidence. But it's been a hell of a mission, hasn't it?
It has been, and we don't know how much longer it will go on. However, we also have a lot of things that have happened since we started our shelter. We started hosting retreats for war widows and their children. So they come and they're able to spend a week in the mountains, and we do a lot of just rehabilitation for them with mental health help and things. And regardless of when this war ends, right? Like, this is something that's going to be needed for years in the future, as well as for more recently for veterans and their families. So if you're a veteran in Ukraine, probably it's not because you were released from your service, right? It's because you were wounded in action. And so we've more recently started doing similar retreats to our war widow retreats, but more for the gear of our veterans and their families. And so just like looking for ways to help and to keep helping Ukraine hold hope and join together. One of the most special things about both of these types of retreats, right, is that you find like-minded people and you realize that you're not alone. And that whatever you're walking through, right, if it's at our Ant Hill shelter and we're talking about people who have been displaced by war, I've been displaced twice now. And so just having that in common with each other and being able to say, hey, we're in this together. We're going to keep pressing on. We're going to keep looking for light and hope in a world that feels really dark and scary sometimes.
You've mentioned Ant Hill a couple of times, and I want to just pronunciate that so people can hear exactly what she's saying. But this is what they came to. Didn't initially call it that way, but imagine kicking an anthill, and once you're done kicking it, watch what the ants do. The ants are immediately working to rebuild, and there's a sense of resilience that is there, and there's a sense of support that is there as they align together. And it turned out to be sort of the perfect name for your ad hoc effort, didn't it?
Absolutely. I don't know. We laugh about it now, just because it kind of, I don't know, everything in the beginning, right, was just happening really fast. And so I was actually bringing aid in to the border one time and told them the name of the organization on the customs declaration. And they started laughing at me and they said, why ants? Why not camels? But absolutely, ants carry more than their own weight, right? And Ukrainians do this very well. And when they work together, they can do a whole lot. And we've seen the whole country, right, come together and continue to find ways to help. And like you said, to rebuild, even in the midst of being attacked, which is really incredible.
Well, you and I have had this conversation many times, but experiencing a hurricane is nothing like what you've gone through, because it's almost like the hurricane hit and it just stayed there, and the damages continues to sustain, and the impact on people continue, and so on. But one thing that I think is important, and I think I've mentioned this to you before, but it's worthy of mentioning again. One of the things we learned after Hurricane Katrina hit coastal Mississippi was that buildings do not make a community. It's the people that make a community. Mm-hmm. And, we don't define, for people who said after Katrina, should certain areas rebuild, they didn't really appreciate what made that community to begin with. It was the people who love it and have a connection with it, and the memories and the family connections and all of that. But what we're learning about Ukraine is, man, it's a phenomenal story about its people. I mean, even today, people talk about. Macron talked about it in a press conference this week. That what we've learned about Ukraine, we thought that they would fall rapidly, and here we are 3 years later, and they are defending ground like no one ever imagined. But you're not surprised by that, are you?
Not at all. They told us 3 days before Ukraine would fall, and here we are 3 years later, and it hasn't been easy. And we know that the road ahead is not easy. But Ukrainians, they know how to stand up for what they want. They've proven this over and over again in history, and I think their strength really is in their commitment to one another, and their love for each other, and their desire to, like you said, build community and uh, find a way to survive. I don't know. It's resilience almost. They're just very, I've always said they're resilient people, and I hate that they have to be resilient people, but it's incredibly inspiring.
I know that it is. Listen, Laurie actually is fresh back from Kyiv. We don't know the exact community she's in Western Ukraine now for good reason. But when we come back on the other side, I'm curious about the mood in Kyiv when she was there. We'll continue our conversation with Laurie Jackson, a missionary in Ukraine, as we speak. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. I'm thrilled to have my friend. I really believe Laurie Jackson is a dear friend now after all the time we spent together talking about her amazing country, Ukraine. She's coming to us from Ukraine, and she's involved in a volunteer effort that is very similar to what you would have seen here, what you would see in Mississippi after a flood or a major tornado or a hurricane. People come together and they find ways to fill gaps, and it's come in so many different ways. I mean, I remember in the early days, there were certain types of equipment that guys on the front line didn't have, and you guys were literally, shuttling necessary equipment to them on the front line. It could be helping a family get to Poland. It could be helping them get back. It could be, as you pointed out, putting together efforts for families who have lost a loved one and dealing with those difficult mental situations that come from that. It comes in a lot of different forms, doesn't it?
Absolutely. We still have things that we're sending to the front. But in the beginning, it was gloves. It was, like things for survival, right? For our guys on the front. And now, 3 years in, we're doing much better in that regard. Ukraine provides a lot of things for their military, but at the same time, there's always a place where there's need, right? And we have lots of civilians who need help. We send out food packages, medicine. We do mental health help with partners who are professionals in that field. And we know that there will be lots and lots of help needed in the future as well.
So in the early days of your effort, you found a hotel. Are you still in that same location, the hotel that you had been in?
We are in the same hotel that we ended up in, and we ended up spending the first night here just because we needed a place to stay. We had fled Kyiv. There were explosions happening. We weren't sure what was going to happen next, and this is where we made it about 22 hours into our journey. And we spent the night here, and the next morning we all gathered together to decide what happens next. And we ended up sending women with children across the border. And my friend Lisa, who didn't have any children, and her husband Sasha and I were here with another family, and we said, we want to stay. And we said, okay, if we're staying, what are we doing? And we just started calling people and saying, we have a place to stay, come, and trying to help people on the road. And at the time, you couldn't get fuel at the gas stations. And so we were helping provide fuel along the way. And just all sorts of things like this.
Then you raised money and bought vans, and it's just been it's been a situation where what do we need now, and how do we get it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you introduced me along the way. You mentioned Sasha, but you introduced me to some people working with you along the way. How are they doing? What's the latest on some of the people that you've introduced me to?
Mm-hmm. So some of our friends that you've met are in the military currently. One of them, his family was across the border for about 2.5 years. And the one thing he would say every time I would talk to him is, Lori, please pray that my family can be together. Like whatever happens next, please pray that my family can be together. And And actually recently, his family was able to move back, and they're here, and they're together as much as they can be with his job on the front. But and then another friend that I introduced you to, Zhenya, he's here with us, continuing to help. And I think you spoke with Anya, and Anya has two little girls, and her husband is also in the military, but she was recently able to move back to Kyiv, and her girls are in school there, and doing well, pressing on.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people had very successful lives and doing so many incredible things, and entrepreneurially and otherwise, who are now involved in the military. But that's just the way it is now, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And some people are like have had to put their careers on hold, right? While they either are in the military or volunteering in other ways.
Hmm. Okay, so you just returned from Kyiv. What's the mood in Kyiv these days?
Kyiv is very interesting place to be. It's a very big city. It's a very innovative city. I don't know how to describe it to you exactly, but it's very loud right now. I was there, and there were several missile strikes, one of the largest ones since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. And so scary in some ways, but people are living there. They're going about their lives. When I got to the building where my apartment is, there was a flag on the building, and below the flag there were flowers and candles placed. And I understood that one of the residents, one of my neighbors, had been killed on the front. And so these are just, I don't know, like it's this very interesting dichotomy, right? Of life is happening, and at the same time, like tragedy is happening, and they coexist in a very interesting way.
Yes, it's amazing to me. I remember a year or two ago, you've described it even more profoundly now than you did a couple of years ago. But what was interesting is how life just went on in Kyiv. I mean, people on the streets eating, and economy is thriving for the most part, considering what is happening. People going to work, people living their lives. To say that it's an interesting dichotomy is incredible, but it's true, isn't it?
Yeah,
People
absolutely.
think that in a war everything comes to a halt, but it doesn't work that way.
I have several friends who have opened businesses since I have one friend who, at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, on the Russia invaded on Thursday, and on Friday they were supposed to open a pizzeria. Obviously, they didn't open on Friday, but by summer of 2022, they opened their pizzeria, and it's doing well. I visited every time I'm in Kyiv. I have another friend whose home was destroyed in the first several months of war, and they started a bar in the middle of Kyiv, and she said, it's my like active resistance. It's my saying I'm still here. It's my saying I'm going to continue to live when that
Yeah.
was being taken away.
Well, I mean, again, that's another symbol of resilience from the Ukrainian people. Laurie, we talked a little bit about the current situation. There's so much we don't know. But what can you say about how you see what's unraveling, or say unraveling is really the wrong word. Let's hope that things continue to move in a positive way, that is in a way that Ukrainians can accept it and that we can end this war. But when you think about kind of where we are, what can you say and what comes to mind for you?
For ending the war? Oh, it's going to be hard. I hope that it will end. I hope that it will end in a way that saves the lives of civilians. But what my Ukrainian friends will tell you is that for the war to end, all that has to happen is for Russia to leave. But what it takes to make that happen, I don't know. And
Yeah.
I feel like Ukraine feels like they're being left out of a conversation. And that's happening amongst other world leaders. And Ukraine knows how to speak up for themselves. If you look at all the ways and all the revolutions that we've seen, even in my time here, we had the Orange Revolution where they ousted, where they went back for free elections, right? Or we have the Revolution of Dignity, which was right before the war began in 2014, right? Saying to the president they didn't want in office to oust him from that position. And so here too, I think Ukraine will let us know what they want, regardless of what's happening on the world stage.
Well, Laurie, as I mentioned when we're out the air, if you like laws and sausage, don't watch either one get made. I think the same thing is true for watching the peace talks, and because we can only evaluate based on the various dimensions we hear about. I mean, there's a lot of public dimensions we don't hear about. We should, if you really want to get a complete picture. But to get a complete picture is hard, and especially when you understand that there's so much that's happening behind the scenes that we don't know about. And I do think that this notion of Ukraine not being part of the conversation was a really important point, and I'm not so certain that that's the case anymore. I think maybe Ukraine is part of it, but your point is not what is happening in reality, is what do Ukrainians feel? Do they feel like they're part of the conversation? And will the outcome be one that we can believe that we had a voice at the table? And I think maybe with a lot of messy steps along the way, it's become much clearer that we can't reach a resolution if Ukraine isn't the major party in helping to determine what the outcome needs to be. So let's hope all that gets better and that the communication that happens. I think X is a very good forum because people in Ukraine, even though it's messy, it's nasty, and all these other things, you can still see some truth that may or may not be hidden along the way. So it's really good to talk to you. We're out of time, but I can't wait to have you back. God bless you, my friend. I'm so proud of you for keeping up such a great effort.
Thank you very much for your time today. And it's always good to talk to you.
Yeah, you bet. God bless you. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation.